Well, thank you so much for joining me here today. Let me start with you, Mike. You're the co-founder and commercial director on the board of Scottish Renewables. Tell me, Scotland for you is an important market for offshore wind energy. Why is that so? Why is it so important for you?
Yes, it is. It's been an important market in offshore wind for a number of years now. We've got 1 gigawatt of operational wind farms at the moment, and we've got about 5 gigawatts of consented projects and another 5 gigawatts of projects currently in the later stages of development. And that was before the ScotWind announcement in January this year, which put another 25 gigawatts of projects into the pipeline, including 14.5 gigawatts of floating wind. So for that reason alone, Scotland is one of the most important markets in terms of offshore wind, and particularly in terms of floating, in terms of driving the floating supply chain and driving costs out of the floating technologies. So Scotland, just by its very pipeline, by the very nature of the number of projects, is an important market, but also its attributes. Scotland is a very deep water, naturally, in its terms of its location. It has expansive seabed. It also has significant deep water engineering capability from the offshore oil and gas industry. That's given us capability in terms of project delivery that we're looking to try and build on to start delivering industrial capacity. And our hope is ultimately in Scotland that industrial capacity is something that we can support other countries on around the world as they also seek to roll out deep water and floating wind.
And indeed, you were selected during the recent ScotWind leasing round, and you will be constructing a mixed offshore wind farm in Scotland. Tell us more about that project. What exactly is going to happen? What's the timeline? How much bottom fixed and how much floating wind energy?
Yeah, so ScotWind, as you know, highly competitive process. There was 74 applications submitted to the ScotWind process globally from developers around the world. You can see actually on the map there, on the left-hand side, you have the sites that were defined by Marine Scotland. That's the Scottish Government branch of the environmental department. And then on the right-hand side there, you actually have the definition of the sites that were awarded on the 17th of January. And as I say, there was 74 applications. Turned out there were 17 sites awarded. 7,000 square kilometres of seabed were awarded, and that is across a combination of floating sites, of which, as I said, 14.5 were floating. There was 9.8 gigawatts of fixed bottom sites as well. And one project was mixed. Our site is actually a predominantly fixed bottom site. It's at the very north of the project, very north of the map there, as you can see there. But it's also, with many Scottish projects, the water depth is at such a level that once we get out and do our surveys, we'll be able to better understand how suitable it is for fixed bottom. We're hoping that the majority of it will be. But there are also, by its very nature, deep water areas that are also suitable for floating. So it's a great site. It gives us optionality, and we're already in the throes of developing it. In terms of the program, if you go to the next slide, actually. This is a quick summary of the site itself at the north of Scotland. An interesting thing as well as having potential optionality offshore between fixed and floating. We're also looking at optionality onshore as well as the offtake solution. So we're looking at both a grid connection and the opportunity of producing green hydrogen on the Orkney Islands, which is an established centre for green hydrogen in the UK. We're looking at first power in 2029. So the programme is already fully underway, the development programme. We're undertaking geophysical surveys now, and we'll be submitting our consent application towards the middle of next year with the hope of securing final investment decision at the beginning of 2026. Now, as I say, this graph here, or this map here, is actually quite helpful to show the optionality that our site has. And again, this isn't unusual in ScotWind. And what it does is it highlights the boundaries and I'd say almost the blending of opportunity between fixed and floating in offshore wind, not just in Scotland, but overseas as well. Fixed bottom is getting deeper, so we believe that we can get the majority of our turbines below 60 metres of water depth, but also floating wind is actually also encroaching somewhat into the fixed bottom space as well. So we're looking at anything above 55 metres would be suitable for floating. So there's a lot of options just in this site alone, and it's a really good example of the options that developers have around the sites in Scotland to bring forward projects.
Of course, on that project, you're cooperating with TOTALENERGIES. Vanessa Godefroy, you're the Managing Director Offshore Wind Europe at TOTALENERGIES. Pour vous, le marché écossais, il est important, certes, mais il y a d'autres marchés en Europe du Nord que vous regardez?
Oui, bien sûr. Alors déjà, au Royaume-Uni, on a 3 marchés principaux pour le flottant. Évidemment, l'Écosse, dont parlait Mike. On voit aussi émerger un marché flottant un peu plus far-shore en mer du Nord, à l'est, et puis un marché en mer Celtique. Donc en mer Celtique, on pense qu'il y a un potentiel qui est vraiment intéressant pour le flottant, d'une part parce qu'on est sur des zones ventées, on est sur des zones qui sont près des côtes, et surtout qui bénéficient de charges réseau qui sont relativement faibles comparées au nord du Royaume-Uni, puisqu'elles sont plus proches des points de consommation. Voilà. Sur cette zone, on développe un projet qui s'appelle Erebus, qui sera le premier projet précommercial, 100 MW, avec notre partenaire Simply Blue. Et on travaille également sur de futurs développements, puisque donc l'appel d'offres Celtic Sea devrait attribuer l'année prochaine 4 gigawatts de projets pour commencer, avec des projets de 300-350 MW à horizon 2030 et plus, et puis des grands projets commerciaux de 1 gigawatt à horizon 2035. Donc si on va plus au nord, au-delà du Royaume-Uni, on a nos amis norvégiens, il y en a certains dans la salle, voilà, qui ont annoncé des grandes ambitions, qui ont annoncé 30 gigawatts à 2040, quelque chose comme ça, et puis surtout une volonté de développer l'industrie du flottant en s'appuyant sur les compétences historiques maritimes et oil and gas. Sur ce marché-là qui est naissant, on a un premier appel d'offres qui s'appelle Utsira North qui doit sortir l'année prochaine et attribuer 1,5 giga de projets, et sur lequel on est en partenariat avec Iberdrola et Norska Vind. Et ensuite, alors on parle de l'Europe du Nord. Alors évidemment, l'Europe du Nord, au niveau mer du Nord, c'est le berceau historique de l'éolien en mer. C'est quand même surtout du fixe, de par les caractéristiques géologiques de la mer du Nord. Mais on voit aussi des premiers développements potentiellement intéressants côté mer Baltique, Suède, Finlande, etc.
D'accord. Et en fait, si on regarde votre portefeuille, l'éolien flottant comparé au l'éolien posé, qu'est-ce que ça représente ou qu'est-ce que ça représentera en termes de pourcentage?
Alors c'est vrai que l'éolien flottant, c'est un marché magnifique, mais probablement beaucoup après 2030. Alors aujourd'hui, on a fait le choix au niveau de TotalEnergies de se positionner très tôt sur le flottant, qui présentait des synergies évidentes avec nos compétences historiques, techniques notamment. Voilà. Ce qui veut dire qu'aujourd'hui, on a à peu près entre un tiers et un quart de notre portefeuille qui est flottant et avec une approche qui est très séquencée pour bénéficier de retours d'expérience à chaque étape. Donc on a un premier projet de 30 MW en développement avec AKER Marine, qui est passé cette année en construction, donc en Occitanie. On a Erebus, donc je viens d'en parler, et puis derrière on a un portefeuille de 2 gigawatts en Corée, avec Corio. On est sur 5 projets flottants, sachant que le premier projet est également le premier à avoir eu sa licence de production d'électricité en Corée. Alors, bon, des ambitions très larges, des défis aussi sur le flottant. Pour résumer, à ce stade, on en voit 4 principales. La décroissance du LCE, évidemment. L'industrialisation, on est sur une fabrication qui est différente du posé et sur une croissance des volumes qui est différente aussi et assez séquencée dans le temps. Philippe, je te lance la balle. Donc, on a également une supply chain qui est à construire. Et puis enfin, on se positionne aussi sur le côté technologie flotteur, au sens où ce qu'on voit là récemment, c'est une multiplication des concepts. Je crois qu'on est entre 70 et 100 concepts qu'on regarde, alors plus ou moins évidemment, et chacun expliquant assez logiquement pourquoi il sera le meilleur. Donc pour répondre complètement à votre question, ça veut dire qu'un tiers, un quart du portefeuille, ça veut dire qu'il y en a 2 tiers ou 3 quarts qui sont du fixe. On est évidemment très fortement positionné sur le fixe. Alors au dernier Synergie en septembre, je disais qu'on avait 4 gigawatts de portefeuille fixe en développement ou en construction, principalement UK et Taïwan. En 10 mois, on est passé de 4 à 9 gigawatts en portefeuille, avec donc le projet West of Orkney dont parlait Mike, avec nos récents succès aux US. Que ce soit du fixe ou du flottant, dans les 2 cas, il faut de fortes compétences techniques et un ancrage territorial. Voilà. La différence aujourd'hui, elle est sur le volume, elle est vraiment sur le côté maturité. Donc on le voit sur un bon exemple aujourd'hui, c'est le projet Cotentin avec notre partenaire RWE. En France, on commence à parler sur le flottant, 250, éventuellement 500 MW un jour. Là, on parle 1 gigawatt, on parle potentiellement 2,5 gigawatts dans la foulée. On est sur des sols qui sont très compliqués. On est sur un territoire qui est déjà investi dans le développement de l'éolien. Voilà, donc quelque part, c'est un peu ce que disait Mike, on ne dissocie pas complètement le fixe du posé. Le fixe du flottant, justement.
Et la France va être un marché important pour vous dans l'avenir, j'imagine.
Alors, déjà, la France, évidemment, déjà la France, c'est un pays particulier pour nous. Voilà. C'est un pays particulier parce qu'on est français. Voilà. Au niveau offshore wind, on est passé de 0 à 100 personnes à Paris. Ici au Havre, on est à 2 encablures de sites où il y a 1500, je crois, personnes, collaborateurs de la compagnie qui travaillent. Sur le flottant, on espère que la France sera un marché important pour nous, puis pas que pour nous d'ailleurs. La France a été un des premiers pays à se positionner sur le flottant avec la AKER OFFSHORE en 2015, avec les fermes pilotes. C'est une des 3 priorités de TAS actuellement. Donc oui, après il reste de même que sur le nord de l'Europe un certain nombre d'enjeux. Sur Bretagne-Sud, ce qu'on voit, c'est qu'il va y avoir 3 enjeux clés. Il va y en avoir un premier qui va être de construire un premier projet commercial flottant en très très forte concertation avec l'ensemble des co-usagers et en particulier la pêche. Il va y avoir fixé une première référence de prix, ça va être une première mondiale quand même, de fixer une référence de prix de l'électricité sur le flottant en s'engageant à le construire dans un certain nombre d'années avec cette référence, donc avec une réflexion technique qui doit être poussée, avec des projections industrielles qui doivent être poussées aussi, et puis un troisième enjeu qui est très fort aussi sur Bretagne Sud, qui est d'imaginer et de réaliser un plan industriel ad hoc qui va être en ligne avec le secteur d'île. Ce qu'on voit aujourd'hui sur Eolmed, sur Eolmed, on est sur une fabrication de flotteurs on fait les tôles à Bagnac-sur-Célé au Creusot. On fait les flotteurs, on fabrique les flotteurs sur le nouveau site industriel à Port-la-Nouvelle et on assemble le flotteur, la turbine sur le flotteur sur le nouveau quai. Donc on est sur un design idéal, sur une fabrication Archimède, je crois que Vincent parlait ce matin, et puis sur une installation qui sera assurée par Bourbon. Donc on est vraiment sur, la fabrication française, on la vit, voilà, avec tout ce que ça peut comporter d'enthousiasme, avec toutes les questions que ça pose aussi au quotidien. Et puis donc oui c'est important, oui c'est émergent, mais c'est surtout là.
Well, thank you very much. Philippe Kavafyan, you're CEO at AKER Offshore Wind, Norway's AKER Offshore Wind. And you also have a project in France, les éoliennes flottantes du Golfe de Lion, through your participation in Principe Power. Tell us a bit more, in a nutshell, what's going on with that project? When will it be feeding electricity into the grid and what's happening?
Well, indeed, good afternoon. So I'm the Norwegian guy speaking with the French accent, so I'm going to behave. Vanessa said everything I had to say, so I can just complement with the specific steps that we are going through. So everyone knows that I used to be providing wind turbines, and so this project, this free turbine project, is going to use the same principal power semi-sub proven technology, but with a 10 megawatt class machine. And it passed recently the final investment decision together with 2 other demonstration projects in France. So we are going to have this, I would say, final after Windfloat Atlantic and Kincardine projects. I think there's going to be very little to prove in accepting the idea that a 10 megawatt turbine can float. And now we really have to focus on what Vanessa was saying as one of the challenges, which is how do we industrialize and how we reduce the leverage cost of energy for floating through mainly serial production and simplification. So of course the experience is key, because you need to know what you want to simplify and what type of obstacle you want to mitigate. And I think it's a fundamental step for considering gigawatt class wind farms. So ScotWind is a little bit far in time, so I'm going to mention 2 elements. There's, of course, in Norway, we have, I would say, some characteristic. Vanessa almost promoted Norway as a country, so I'm not going to repeat it too much, but fundamentally you have oil and gas industry with all the right competencies and industrial capabilities to deliver on the floating technology. You have deep water and a huge coast, like we underlined this morning. And you have, which is good to finance energy transition, you have very strong financial capabilities with both the industrial companies and the oil and gas resources. So basically you have everything in place to constitute a tremplin or a stepping stone for an industry that needs to get scale. So I think the fundamental solution for floating is going to get scale, because we can get through standardization and the fact that we have mobile assets. You don't need to have 20 solutions for an industrial cluster. So the idea would be to have critical mass to deliver on the Scottish market, on the Norwegian market, maybe on the Irish market at one point in time, the possibility to efficiently deliver megawatts and megawatts of the same solution. This is where we believe that not only floating will take off, but it will also accelerate the deployment.
Right. I mentioned it earlier, through your stake in Principal Power, obviously you have a certain experience in the sector. Everybody's thinking of the 25 megawatt Windfloat Atlantic project that was powered up in 2019. Are there any secrets you could share with us, about how to improve things? What have you learned?
Well, there is, I think the best people to share with you is, you can ask my ex-colleagues, investors, because they put the turbine, and you can ask the Principal Power people what they learn. But I think my main takeaway is this is much more than a design. And Vanessa mentioned completely rightfully that we have maybe over 60 design concepts right now. There's a lot of paper concept. And every time we go a little bit further down the concrete design, implementation and prototyping, people start stepping back from their concept, because they realize what it takes to have a real product or a real solution. And what I took away from the discussion with both sides is that it's a real competency to bring an industrial product in large serial quantity to be anchored at sea. And so all this EPC, what we call the engineering, procurement, construction or installation phase of floating, is actually a dominant element of the delivery model. And I think if we just take separate companies that have either design expertise or only even turbine expertise without having the experience of marine operation, I think we are going to come short of what we need to deliver a wind farm at the gigawatt scale. So my main takeaway is really look at it with all the competencies around the table, and include specialized marine operators for delivering floating wind farms.
Right. Can I ask you that question as well? The question I put to Vanessa about the markets in Northern Europe. You already talked about Norway. What other markets would you be looking at? The same ones, or?
No, Norway, of course, is our home market, so we feel like we are going to play strong in Utsira Nord. That's clear. Norway has indeed announced 30 gigawatt of awarded capacity by 2040. Just before that, Sweden has been coming very strong with announcement. I think the message that everyone needs to figure out is that there's a huge reservoir of hydro in the north of Europe. I mean, both Sweden and Norway enjoy very clean electricity from hydro. But the need for decarbonization of very heavy industrial players and the offtake needs that they will have to decarbonize, plus the energy security demand that now has been created with the situation in Ukraine, has created a complete different look at what should we do with the gas or what should we do with hydro. And we should really think about adding capacity, massive capacity. There's going to be a deficit in power in Norway by 2026. And Sweden has very strong ambition to be one of the very first decarbonized economy by in the 40s. And to get there, we basically will have to make a very specialized use of hydro as a backup. And you cannot use hydro for base load or anything like that. So you really want to have offshore wind to come with a strong renewable capacity that is backed up by a good hydro, and gas and green hydrogen will probably be most useful to be shipped to Germany.
All right, to my country. Well, thank you very much for joining me here on stage. Thank you, Mike Hay, from joining us from Scotland, I suppose.
Yep,
yeah?
That's right.
And thank you all for listening to this roundtable. This is it, really. Time flies. This is the end of day one at Synergie.